Welcome. All righty, we'll go ahead and get started. It's wonderful to have everybody here today. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss. Here. Halliburton. Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willits. 4 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. So today we've got our budget workshop on the agenda. I just wanted to kind of set the stage with a couple remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Alicia. I look forward to this conversation today. This is the first of what will be regular budget-related strategic planning workshops between now and our first official budget workshop. And today we want to have a conversation about our projections for where we stand revenue-wise. What we expect, and because of that, what we expect general fund resources to be. A discussion about the flexibility, or, to be honest, it's there's not a ton of flexibility, but we've got some to have a conversation about that. And I really hope to have a rich discussion with you from the perspective of both. I see this like a collaborative discussion. I'm going into this budget with a sense of both collaboration and caution, given the constraints that we have in rising costs. But to have a rich discussion with you about the priorities we have, the ways in which we need to be sure that we continue to provide the current level of service to our residents. So how we both provide service external to City Hall, but then also run the business as the city of Boise, and make sure that we have those foundations set as we're also looking at what more we want to do. And I also want to highlight, too, that as we seek to ensure that not only today we're a safe and welcoming city for everyone, but that we are into the future, that this process, both today and then forward when staff comes back after direction for what to bring next, we truly will be looking from a capital planning perspective and M&O perspective at a multi-year timeline to get stuff done. And so part of what I hope to hear from you all today is what you would like to see plans for, whether it be 4-person staffing. We've talked about, as we come back with capital improvement libraries, and we'll address that in April, other topics that we can really ask our budget staff to plan out multiple years in ahead, so we can see how to get the things we want to get done without necessarily being able to do them all in one year. And then staff is, after we hear from staff, not only is my hope that we'll have a foundational picture about those things that we need to do to maintain service, run the business, and then a sense of where we want to head with more and new for our residents. But staff will be able to walk away with direction and understanding and direction on what to bring back as we pace out the work that we do between now and the budget workshops in May and June. And with that, I'll pass it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. And as Mayor said, today's a workshop. I'm hoping we can really treat it as a discussion as well. We're talking about budget process, not making decisions. And really, I hope we can shape the direction that we're planning to go forward from. My plan is to walk through several things. First, the financial reality that we're facing. We're going to discuss what's already committed and what pressures we're facing. And most importantly, we're going to create space for you all to talk about priorities as well. Because ultimately, this budget is a reflection of mayor and council priorities. And here we are, our job is to translate that into something that's financially sustainable. So I will start with some slides, and then we'll move into discussion. So for the FY 2027 budget goals, we are approaching it trying to balance several things at once. At the most basic level, we're trying to keep delivering the services residents rely on every day. We're preparing for a more uncertain economic situation, and we're making room for the priorities you've identified. So we're framing the 27 budget as a run the business approach. And that means increases will focus on unavoidable costs that are needed to maintain existing programs and services. Any new investments will largely be supported by new program revenues or will be offset with some cuts or reallocations. And one-time funding will be maximized to address critical needs. So when considering new or expanded investments, we need to be clear about how they're going to fit into the long-term forecast. And that's really the core tension that we'll be working with together today. How to be intentional about adding new things to balance running the business with identifying ways to pay for the highest priority new investments without adding unsustainable long-term pressures to the budget. So now we'll move into the 10-year forecast. The general fund is a fixed box, is the analogy that we're going to be working with. The general fund is our fund that pays for the majority of the city services. And almost all of it, about 99%, is spoken for, meaning it is committed to pay for existing programs and services. So that is our staff, contracts, ongoing operations. And that leaves about that top 1% of the box to pay for new things. And on an annual basis, in the 10 years of our forecast, that's an average of about 6 million. And that is just an estimate. At this point, we will continue to update our forecast, but it's around 3 to 8 million on average, about $6 million a year. So when we discuss adding something new, whether it's increases to run the business or new library facilities or maintenance, new programs, it has to fit into that 1%, that small bar. Otherwise, we need to make a conscious decision to reallocate what gets funded within the box, push something out of the box, or find a way to grow the box. And none of those options are easy. Otherwise, we would have done it. And so, I mean, reallocating what gets funded within the box is a challenging exercise, and one that has been explored within the city in the past, and one that we are actually doing a pilot, priority-based budgeting with Public Works and the Water Renewal Fund this summer. But it really involves universal agreement on strategic priorities, detailed cost accounting, but at the program level, and willingness to shift funds from lower priority programs to higher priority programs. Pushing something out of the box means deciding which services to reduce or stop. And services across the city are things the community depends on and have ongoing costs and obligations that the city is committed to. So not an easy feat by any means, and something that requires trade-offs and prioritization. Growing the box with new revenue is also a challenge. Opportunities for new or increased revenue is largely supported by new spending because it's largely tied to department program revenue, such as business licenses or zoo fees, that sort of thing, and restricted by state code in that respect. And then we're also pursuing federal grant opportunities to grow the box. But as we'll talk about later in this presentation, federal grants are largely one-time opportunities, and the city would have to pick up the ongoing cost of any investments that are ongoing. So again, none of these options are easy. So with our forecast, we have some working assumptions. One, we are maintaining our current level of programs and services. So no growth-driven service expansion is included. We are including some modest increases for wages and benefits for general employees at 2.5% base increase for general employees, and then a health insurance increase at 3%. And then we're also including 2% of base pay combined for flex rewards and one-time performance pay. And then moving on to end of year funds, we do expect some one-time funds to be available at the end of fiscal year 2026. This will give us some flexibility, but it's important to know again that it's one time, so it's not going to change the structural trajectory of our forecast, and we will continue to refine this number as the year goes on. but it is an opportunity to make one-time investments. Some external considerations. We are planning the 27 budget in a very dynamic environment. There is a global conflict that is creating volatility in the energy markets. So we're seeing rapidly increasing fuel costs, which makes everything more expensive. So inflation is affecting many of our materials, especially in construction environment. So the uncertainty could lead to revenue impacts to our revenue forecast and higher operating costs and just less predictability overall. So one of the themes that we would like to leave you with today is maintaining flexibility because conditions can change very quickly. So our 10-year general fund forecast is here on this slide at a very high level. So when we zoom out and look long-term, the pattern becomes very clear. Over the next 10 years, we consistently have 1% of general fund revenue available for flexibility. And small changes, especially in wages and benefits, can eliminate that margin quickly. So decisions we make today don't just affect the next year, they carry forward. A relatively small ongoing cost added today can limit future options or require adjustments such as reductions in the future, which we would like to avoid. So that's why we're trying to have this conversation, to be transparent, that this flexibility is small but completely within the purview of this group. Revenue and expenditure trends. One of the underlying challenges is how revenue and costs grow over time. So our largest revenue source, property taxes, is capped at about 3% growth annually. But our costs don't necessarily follow that same trajectory. Things that we've seen grow faster than that, like software, PERSI, workers' comp costs, for example, or construction, have been growing faster than that over time. So even if things feel maybe stable right now, it could very quickly tighten, and we could see that underneath this grid here. So we're not alone in this. Many cities across the country are experiencing this as well. But luckily we are not in a deficit position like some of the cities across the country.
Alicia,
Yes.
will you touch on why this on the green revenue growth rate line, it drops from 3.5 to 2.5 from 27 to 29?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have several assumptions baked in here to this forecast. So there are some, for example, the urban renewal district expiring, which leads to a higher revenue in fiscal year 27. And I will lean to Eric to tell me which urban renewal district it is that's expiring in 27. What?
I'm sorry, I
The-
thought I heard a dog barking.
Okay.
No,
The West Side Urban Renewal District is expiring
is factored into the
Yeah.
revenue in 27.
27.
Yeah, those things, that's what I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure that so it's not that our revenue picture is changing drastically. If we went backwards and had 25, 26, it would be in a different spot.
Correct. And the other thing is this is just the growth rate. And so it's not that it,
Sorry. Yeah, because we're at the percentage.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the kind of one thing that I realized we haven't put in here is, and maybe it's forward, but I just want to check. I mean, given the legislative parameters around municipal revenue, and this is something that's happening throughout the state with cities and this region, all of us are talking about this right now. The assumptions in here, even looking at revenue, are that we are looking at fully taking property tax and looking at foregone because that could disappear in the future. And given the constraints around growth related to 389, is that baked into here already?
Mayor, in our 10-year forecast, we don't have taking foregone assumed yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. So the foregone would give us a little bit more flexibility then for those, the investments that might want to be made.
Correct.
Great, thanks.
Before we talk about new priorities, it's important to recognize what's already built into the fiscal year 27 plan. There are some significant investments already committed, including some major capital projects, technology systems, and public safety equipment. And we also have pathways projects, and these reflect past decisions as well as ongoing commitments. So you'll see here we have the ongoing investment in Axon technology for police. Our new ERP system implementation is underway. And then there is the year-end housing deposit, so additional housing investments in 27 as well. And then on the capital side, a number of park projects, and then equipment replacement, fire engine for fire, and then, as I said, pathways as well. At the same time, there are also significant needs that are not yet funded. These include revenue loss due to the loss of the Meridian Legal Services contract, while at the same time, we have a county requirement to provide expanded courtroom representation. The capital fund as well has multi-year pressures, such as deferred maintenance on all city assets, estimated at approximately $70 million, as well as multi-year geothermal deferred maintenance, estimated at about $20 million. And then there are a number of operating costs. We do have known operating costs in our forecast, but beyond those known costs, things such as software, PERSI, things that could come to us at any time that would need to be funded, such as workers' comp, just growth beyond what we have forecasted. And then our ERP system replacement, we do have a placeholder that we saw on the previous slide, but as we get into implementation and hiring consultants, our placeholder might not be sufficient.
And Alicia, these are multi-year investments. So when we have the work session on capital fund, we'll both be looking at the projects on the dock, like kind of build of parks, discussions around libraries, M&O, potential new facilities, pools, what have you. But then we'll also see some of this built into it as well for a discussion.
Mary, yes, absolutely. We can look at what we have slated for the next 5 years, as well as the items you see here. And we can also discuss the development impact fee update, which is kicking off this year.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
while we're on this slide, Alicia, I would, we don't need to talk about it now, but I think I would like to see what our assessment is on the courtroom staffing costs. Traditionally, how often we've staffed those and what potential inefficiency we see. So how much are we going to be contributing to inefficiencies regularly, just based on kind of historical courtroom needs? And I'd also be curious what other cities are seeing, if we've had conversations with other cities, and because obviously those inefficiencies will hit all of us. So just curiosity, thanks.
And I'd actually suggest that if there's information that we have, that we should share it now, because this is a big cost impact. We knew when Meridian was heading into that levy election that if it passed, this was one of the things that was included in it. They wanted to have their own system. But there are inefficiencies, none of which we have control over in terms of court staffing. But if you all would walk through that, or if Jamie is, I didn't mean to call Jamie on the spot. If somebody's here that could address that, I think we ought to share the information that we've got.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Morales. In terms of the courtroom coverage, I don't have the exact costs or sort of inefficiencies. We can follow up with that. But essentially the way up until November of last year, we were covering 7 courtrooms, meaning we have to have an attorney available for each of those 7 courtrooms each day, regardless of what's on the court's docket that day. That's jumped up to 10 now. regardless of what we're doing with Meridian. Meridian will also have to cover courtrooms as well. So we can sort of dig into what those inefficiencies are with the information we have. That's a decision the county made that we're now responding to. So we're stretched thin. What that looks like is adding a couple attorney FTEs for our needs to cover those courtrooms.
Madam Mayor, Hannah, thank you. And can you speak to, do we know, is Meridian required to do 10, or are they some other proportion? Garden City as well. I'd be curious how they staff.
Mayor and council member, I'll confirm if we have the exact same numbers.
In the past, when we had Meridian's contract, were we the person for Meridian and for Boise?
Mayor, that's correct. So we
Right,
would
so we
cover the
had
same-
7, and then the city of Meridian didn't have to have people because our one person in the courtroom could jump up and address any Meridian or Boise case.
That's correct.
Yeah, so now we have those people plus more because the courts have grown without that revenue source, and we're covering just one city. So that in itself is one of those inefficiencies. Yeah.
So wrapping up on this slide, these items not yet included in the forecast will need to compete with the 1%, with the limited resources, along with any new priorities that we're considering for the 2027 budget. We're also exploring external funding opportunities to support and expand services where possible and with aligned with our goals. So these opportunities include transportation, parks, public safety. So these can help us advance priorities without relying entirely on the general fund. They do come with limitations. As I previously said, federal grants are generally one time. So if we accept a federal award, such as a SAFER grant for 4-person staffing, that is a 3-year award. After that 3rd year, the city would then need to fund the firefighters that are hired with that award. So that's just something to keep in mind if we are committing to ongoing services with a federal award. But some of these are one-time and don't have ongoing cost implications as well.
And I want to say here too, city staff has really leaned in on this. Council members were clear in the last couple of years that you wanted the team to go in that direction. I wanted the team to go in that direction. And the city's been successful in the tune of really over $100 million. We should really get the number in the last 6 years that where we've brought grant funding to Boise to deliver for residents. And now what staff is doing is leaning in even further to then take a look at where we could fund items that are important to this community and service delivery with grants, so that then we could use general fund for other, and really looking at kind of the return on investment that grants would have. And I've seen some more across my desk in terms of questions about, or a recommendation that staff chase a grant than even before, and we were seeing quite a bit before. So really appreciate staff's work on this because it will allow our dollars to go further.
So this slide brings together many of the priorities we've heard discussed in last year's budget work sessions, as well as other meetings since then. Some of the priorities listed here are more defined with estimated costs, as well as potential alternative funding sources. Others are a little less defined, and we have them listed as not scoped. So as you'll see here on the scoped side, we have priorities listed: 4-person staffing. We have the FY27 cost listed, and then alternative funding options such as the SAFER grant. I'll note with the ongoing costs, particularly with staffing, it is just the 27 costs. So those costs escalate over time. So for 4-person staffing, for example, it's $600,000 in year 27, but by the end of our forecast period in 2036, it would be over $2 million. So just to keep that in mind as we're looking at the list of priorities here. For police staffing as a reference point, we have the metric of 1.8 officers per 1,000, and we're showing the cost, the average cost of one officer. As an alternative funding option here, we have listed a federal cops hiring grant as a potential. 1 mile of pathway per year with an estimate of $1 to $2 million. A potential alternative being the open space levy. We'll start receiving that tax revenue next year. And then the library major repairs and maintenance, current estimate between 2.5 and 3.5 million. We are applying for a National Leadership for Libraries grant as a potential alternative as well. We have downtown library improvements at 7.2 million. We have listed the increase for health insurance. Our forecast currently holds a 3% increase for employer contribution to health insurance each year. If we were to increase that to 4.5%, it would be $400,000 in the first year, but it would escalate to $6 million by 2036. If a priority was to be wage increases for general employees above what we're forecasting, which is 2.5% each year, every 0.5% is estimated to be about $500,000. And that's again, in 27 and would escalate each year. And then to be determined additional facility square footage and staffing. We're working on numbers, but yes, those are additional costs that would, again, come from the 1%. I'll pause here. Happy to take any questions. And we certainly have lots of folks in the audience who can answer detailed questions as well.
Madam Mayor, while I certainly support finding one-time monies to offset some of these priorities, especially the 1 mile of pathway, I would just caution that I would view the open space levy as maybe a last resort for our general pathway planning. And to the extent that we're not furthering 10-minute walk to a park access, I would probably not be, it's not a first place I would go to for that. But I do recognize based on our 2x2 meetings that the pressure that we're putting on the general fund by adding more money each year ongoing to pathways, that certainly willing to entertain a conversation of pausing that if there are competing priorities that we want to evaluate as a council.
The question on that, so just as a follow-up, so I want to just make sure that I'm hearing this correctly in terms of tiering for that open space parks and pathways levy, meeting our 10-minute walk to a park goal and pathways expansion, but you don't want to look at that levy as the fund for all the pathways if it means that we don't advance, like make progress on our 10-minute walk to a park goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I think along with that, I certainly see the logic behind, we have a goal of a 10 minutes walk to a park and using our open space levy, I think is a great way to help advance that. The one caveat I'd probably say in regards to pathways and using open space levy, if there's pathways identified, the increased safety for schools, kids getting to school, or a safe way or improve the safety of our residents, then I would like to consider using the open space levy. In addition, meeting the 10-minute walk to a park and for safety.
Sure. And to be clear, the language in that does allow the levy to be used for that. This is going to be ping pong.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I just add, I'm speaking specifically about using it to offset our commitment and
Gotcha.
not speaking about other things in general.
Okay. All right.
Madam Mayor, I think I'll ask this. I think, as we talk about that ongoing thin margin of 1%, And as we consider these priorities and how that margin will get smaller in the future, and I appreciate how you note those things, and particularly in terms of public safety. If we were to take advantage of federal grant funds, we have some sort of period commitment. Would there ever be a situation where a city might take advantage of grant funds, fulfill that commitment of whether it's the 3 or 5 years, whatever that is, and then may not be able to continue to staff those extra positions? Or is it something where the city would not want to pursue those grants unless we were fully committed after the commitment was resolved?
I'll jump in with the answer to that. I would say that before we pursue a grant, which I think we ought to consider, we'd want to have the plan for what after the grant. So I wouldn't want us to be flippant in, well, we'll do this and then not know what happens in year 4. So as we look at how we budget responsibly for this community in this 5 to 10 year window, if we were to price in as we do, I mean, this is one of the things I think staff wants to know if we ought to come back with, and I do too, a plan for a multi-year plan, a decades-long multi-year plan for 4-person staffing and for police staffing, what that looks like, the time that it would take. Then we would ask the question of, okay, then what could we get from grant funds to help us start this? But then the next piece of that planning has to be what happens after 3 years. And I don't think it's a bad thing. We've asked the departments to look at their infrastructure needs, their people needs, so that we can have a discussion around public safety funding in general and determine, maybe part of that plan is this is what we aspire to do, and these are the deadlines by which we want to have this all filled. We're going to seek a SAFER grant in this year, and then we'll start with the SAFER grant, and then before that ends, we'll go to the ballot like Meridian did with a bond, and to see if that works, right? So that's the discussion we have to have from a capital planning and budget perspective, I believe, before we say, oh yeah, let's add these folks in. Some cities might be like, well, we'll just do it and see what happens. But if we just do it and see what happens, then at that end of year 3, you're at a fiscal cliff, or you're pressed with, we're going to cut all these police and firefighters, not something anybody wants to do from a public safety perspective, or you've got to get a whole bunch of other programs to fund it. So it is really important that we step that out.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I really appreciate the staff's work in how we're laying this out, not only for council's collaboration, but also I think from a public perspective to really understand what we're grappling with. I know that there's probably nobody up here that doesn't want to see all of these things move forward. And I think it's very clear that that's not on the table this year. And our budget flexibility is continuing to get more difficult and more constrained. From my perspective, I would really like to see us working into a long-term plan, I guess, like continued support for library expansion at some point. And that's not, I think in our library joint meetings, that's been clear that that's not happening this year or next year, but that's an ongoing goal. And I know that we'll never have the funds to expand staffing, square footage improvements unless we kind of start squirreling that money away. That's an interest of mine. And then additionally, the 4-person staffing for fire department, even if that's, even if we're looking at the goal of 1 station over the next 3 years, reevaluate at that time. I appreciate what the SAFER grant can offer, and I appreciate the entertaining different funding paths to help us get there. That's something that we've heard often from our partners in the fire department. That conversation has been going on for years, and I would love to see some long-term approach of how we can get there. Those would be my top interests on this, I guess, on how we can, what that would look like for long-term planning. Yeah, I guess that's where I'd start, and I'm sure that will spur some conversation by other council members.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll have more conversations on it, and I don't want to turn this into a safer grant session. But one thing that comes to mind is something like the safer grant worth doing if you're not doing multiple stations at once, and does it just make sense just to fund that ourselves until we want to take a bigger bite at the apple? And if this isn't the year to do multiple stations, or we can't backfill that in successive years as the safer grant winds down, like, do we need a multi-year kind of ramp up to be able to afford that? That's something that would be important to me. I'd rather do 4 stations in 3 years than 1 station this year. But we'd obviously need a plan to be able to accomplish that, and not just a hope. I would say on that list, just a signal to probably council, my top priority is increase health insurance to 4.5%. I was very nervous about doing 3% last year, and I'm worried that year over year, 3%, the compounding effect of that, what that will do to staff, premiums, copays, and so forth.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, along with fellow council members and yourself, I agree with something like the safer grant. We need to take a look at, we do need to see that plan of, if we got the safer grant, are we going to go for 9 people, 13 people, 2 people? How is that going to play out long term? And I understand we have a discussion on that, so I won't belabor there.
But just on that, I envision this discussion not centered around the safer grant, but a discussion as to whether or not the safer grant is one of the tools that we use to meet our goals related to
Right.
4-person staffing. So
Yeah.
I just want to be clear about that.
Agreed, and make sure we're revisiting with 4-person staffing, so a goal is 4-person staffing, but what does that get us? Does that increase safety by how much? And make sure we have a clear understanding, because as we're looking to have such limited funding, we want to make sure that those goals and those trade-offs, what is the trade-off for that? And same with the police staffing, is hearing from what do we need today? What do we think our police department needs in the next 5 years as well? So those are 2 of my top concerns. And if I could throw in a third there, is be along with Councilmember Nash, is understanding increased health insurance. I think I'd love to see what the trend has been over maybe the last 3 or 4 prior years. It seems like they are escalating quite a bit, and making sure that we're staffing that appropriately. Thank you. Funding that, not staffing that.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I think we knew what you meant.
And Mayor, I also appreciate Council Member Nash's comments about that. I think it would be really interesting to see what the bang for our buck looks like if we stage and batch these kinds of things over a little bit more than just kind of thinking about this year.
When you say these kinds of
And
things, are you
so-
talking about health
Public
insurance or
safety,
public safety? Okay,
sorry.
great.
Yeah, public safety related. And then on that point of public safety, when we look at the police staffing numbers, I'd really like to see, this is the number of officers, this is the ratio we want to get to. And these are the types of positions that are, first in line for those new positions. What does that kind of priority look like? Because I'd be really curious where things like motors officers would be, where we get a lot of citizen feedback for wanting more traffic enforcement. We're seeing a lot of benefits just from efficiency and priority that's happening
34%
now.
increase.
Yeah, huge. And so I'd just be curious where different, not every officer is doing the same thing, where those new officers look if hey, all this money landed in our lap now or over a series of time, who would we be hiring what for first? And priority, I think, would be helpful for us to see what that those initial needs are that we'd be funding if we did more.
Mary, do you have more? That was the last slide. So I figured we'd be talking a lot longer than this, or I would have given you guys an extra hour. Just as we're here, I appreciate the kind of feedback on what you'd like to see. We don't have a full schedule worked out for all the work sessions, but I will share with you that I envision each of our work sessions between now and the budget workshops to partially include follow-up related to this. There's other things that staff has included as well. But I look forward to, and I'm not wrapping up, but just the a full-fledged discussion on long-term planning for public safety. And what we can do now, how many years we need to do X, and what tools and tactics we ought to use to meet those needs. And see that playing out as well. As President Stead mentioned, the library square footage. I was in this little blue bucket down here of additional square footage, like looking at the capital needs of the city. And in April, the library director is scheduled to come back with more of that. And then we place that in through work sessions into the long-term planning, capital planning as well. So more of those, like looking at how we are strategically using resources today, potential grants in the future, and then resources tomorrow to meet some of those needs.
Madam Mayor, I think the one more thought is I also very much see the value in maintaining flexibility where we can. I know that every year there's expenses that crop up that we weren't intending on, whether they're linked to geothermal or, a park improvement after something happened to this playground or something like that. I mean, there's just always things for us to keep in mind. So for the staff, do you have what you need maybe from council today to work through some of the scenarios on the priorities that have been identified on? And I have a feeling that when you come back to us, it might be, okay, everything that was mentioned today are not things that we can prioritize right away. But do you have enough to work off of now to bring us back some of these scenarios?
President said, yes, I think this is a great start in helping us prioritize. As Mayor said, we are going to start a multi-year kind of strategy for planning for some of these big investments. But that is helpful to hear for planning for flexibility, because we're going to have to balance the run the business side as well as some of these new investments that are going to take a couple of years to really put into action. So this is great direction. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I had a specific question on that last slide. Don't zoom in on me. Give me the slide. Okay. The $170,000 for police staffing, I have the figure 250,000 in my mind, and I'm wondering if that is cost and equipment.
I'll have the chief come up to answer that, or the deputy, whichever one of you wants to. Here, you can take, oh, there's some mics there. Why don't you join us?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash. So the 170, I believe, is going to be the baseline upfit for a standard police officer. So that would be the hiring, their all the costs associated, and then the equipment, the uniforms. For every 2 police officers, we purchase another patrol vehicle. But that is a very baseline. As the department grows, we'd have to look at increased staffing. 1 detective is 1 vehicle. And then as you start building out with sergeants, lieutenants, captains, potentially additional deputy chiefs, although I work him pretty good. He'd probably like 1 eventually. I think that number will obviously fluctuate. It could bump up closer to that 200, 250, just depending on how we hire.
We kind of run into this same thing, Madam Mayor, Chief, with what does it really cost to bring a station to 4-person?
Oh, yeah, with that extra person after
Yeah.
the amount of time.
And so I would say one of the reasons I asked for a slide like this in the presentation is I think council members do a lot of mental math with, well, we have $2 million to spend and this as much is out ongoing. I would just ask that when we do try to capture these figures in the future, that we try not to be conservative, but be more liberal in what the actual costs might be, so that if we think, oh, we could add 2-3 officers this year, we might get closer to real numbers. So if that is low, if there's a way we could have a more updated figure, so that we have an idea of our mind what it would cost, we'd appreciate it. So I just, not saying this number is wrong, just putting that out for why we want to see that and what we want to see out of it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, with our strategic plan, we can actually build that out where it would not just be the baseline police officers. We can build out the command structure and what we currently see as investigative needs. So we should be able to, we can get finance, better numbers based on the dollar for what we'd have to hire out the times we need to hire.
And these are always hard too, because there's the compounding effect of just this number as well. So that 0.6 is this year. It's not next year, right? And then we still have the same limited ability to grow our revenue. So it's there's multiple pieces on it, but appreciate the request that we look like larger where we need to, given what different staffing levels will trigger.
And Madam Mayor, and just to confirm too, is the numbers we're seeing up here for 4-person staffing, police staffing, is that the fully burdened cost with Percy medical costs included?
Councilmember Corliss, very close.
Very
Yes.
close. Okay. Great, thank you.
Madam Mayor, it's my understanding we've got a deadline from our council staff for some more budget priorities. Will we be able to get an updated, when will we see if there's any new priorities? So for example, climate action priorities that may not be on here, things like that. Will we be able to get forecasts for maybe new priorities that rise out of that staff collection?
Yeah, and what I'd say is, yes, you can definitely get forecasts. And then once we have those, we'll revisit this. So, and what I would like staff to bring back next time is, instead of the static slide, is given the priorities that we get, what any of these decisions mean with a section for run the business, because we can't forget the run the business piece in terms of 5 to 10 years, the way we're looking at revenue projections.
Madam Mayor, I would just point out, I think finance would probably be interested in D priorities as well, if we want to take anything off the list. So that's something I joke, but also council, if there are things on here that do not feel like a priority for you this year, signal those things. Or if there's things that are lesser priority, also acknowledge those things, because we're not going to be able to do all of that, obviously.
And then ultimately, I want to be clear, like what this will do in the next exercise with you is, once you have the deadline, is that my team, myself, will look at all of this. We'll bring it back with the game out of what this means from a compounding perspective. And then I'll ask the executive management team to work with me and the budget team to work with me to then really be realistic about what we can fit in for that final proposed budget. And then would want your feedback, but there will definitely be trade-offs. Like we can't even do all this. And there's more stuff that is likely to come.
Madam Mayor, I from my perspective, and I would, correct me if I'm wrong, council, but I think that if the things that maybe weren't specifically mentioned in this meeting, I'm taking as deprioritized for this year. But
Except you guys still have a deadline.
yeah,
That I want to
we're-
recognize and
yes,
respect
okay,
that
thank
deadline.
you. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, could I get some clarity from Council President on this? Did you mean things that are on these slides that we're not actively talking about, or things that aren't mentioned on these slides?
I think things that we didn't bring up on this scoped list, that's my interpretation. If we're not calling it out now, it's not that we're moving forward with a built budget, but I think we're giving direction to staff on which scenarios to bring back to us and dial in. And it doesn't mean that there may not be others that come up in the council homework that we have. But I guess I don't expect them to be as impactful to the budget as the things that we're identifying here.
Okay. Madam Mayor, Council President, I don't know if I quite follow. I would say I feel like what's brought up here is a good capture of things that we've said over the last year and even longer. But just because I didn't mention library major repairs and maintenance today, like those are still things that are obviously important to us and something that we're working on and a priority of the mayor. And I would still expect conversations to continue about that, even if I didn't say it today.
So that's not an official deep priority for you?
No.
I just want to be clear. I didn't take the lack of somebody touching on one of these to mean that it comes off the list right now. That said, there's some of these, all of these are going into the multi-year work that will come back with modeling. And then on top of that, I expect to be hearing from you guys some of the others, and ultimately it can't all happen this year, and then we'll figure out how and when and where in terms of the timeline.
Great, thank you.
I'm gonna ask for my one Christmas present and let Santa Claus do the rest. So that's it. That's my approach.
Madam Mayor. So these are some of the priorities I know the council's talked about over the last year, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say we haven't heard from a lot of our departments yet on what their priorities are and what has changed this year. And I think really need that input to see how it balances out and how we lay that out against some of these priorities as well. That would be very helpful too.
Madam Mayor, do you know or staff know what our timeline is on community feedback when that starts to open when we start to see?
Man, you
community
guys
feedback
are
from it?
racing way ahead of us. Eric, Alicia, whichever one of you has the information on the kind of like public timing.
Yes, the public feedback website will go live April 8th. So we can provide weekly updates after that.
Thank you.
And we're scoping out Eric shared with me some different software. Will you guys share some of that that we might be able to use, if not this time, next time, based on somebody's request? I can't remember who requested, but just learning more about like participatory software that we might be able to use to hear from public.
That's correct, Madam Mayor, members of council. Yeah, we are looking at different software options where residents can effectively log in and they can inform what their priorities are. They can, some of these tools will allow a community member to say, I want to fund this, but then we'll ask a corresponding question. How would you fund that? Where might you come up with the funding for that? Would it be from additional taxes, additional fees, from a cut? And give perspective even on where cuts could come from. So there are a handful of tools that we are currently evaluating, and we would like to present options and potentially bring that forward, if not this year, then next year.
Anything else you'd like us to be thinking about right now as staff returns to get to work? We'll share a timeline that how we see we can game all this out between now and June. Take this feedback, but are there other things that you'd like to make sure that we put a pin in and bring back to you? All right, I'll ask if we can please, Jimmy Halliburton is traveling. He's at a bike congress, and Lucy Willits needed to be out she's not feeling great. Will you make sure, I'm looking at staff, but just get their feedback as well? We'll bring that in. Great. All right. Anything else? Okay, we're going to break and then we'll be back here for the noon meeting. Thanks, everybody.